Finance meeting for the city of Hudson for May 30th, 6 o'clock. Call to order, please. We have first item on the agenda is minutes of the previous meeting. Any changes or additions to that?
I'll move for approval.
Is there a second? Any discussion?
I think I might have had one where,
Okay,
no, actually, that's the next meeting.
Okay.
Never mind, thank you.
all right. All in favor of approval?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Application for operator's license, we have, claims, excuse me. We have claims, and I think everyone received email on it, and we have hard copy here tonight to look at. Any questions, and is there is there a motion to approve?
I'll move to recuse myself, though.
Move for approval in the amount of $289,915.23.
Oh, not from claims.
Yeah, we're in claims. You want to unrecuse yourself?
Yeah.
All right. Is there a second? Second. All right, any discussion on our claims? All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. Operator's license, we have a new one on your table that was submitted. It's got a yellow highlight. I think there's some differences.
This is where I'd like to recuse myself.
Okay. The first recommendation is issuing approval and issuance of regular operator's license for the period of 5/31/12 to June 30th, 2013. And there's a list of about 15 people. Is there a motion to approve? Is there a second? Okay, any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
And then we also have the renewal and issuance of regular operator's license from July 1st, 2012 to 6/30/2014 for those people listed below.
Move for approval.
Is there a second? Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Then at the bottom, we have approval and issuance of temporary operator's license to be used June 29th through July 1st, 2012 during the Hudson Booster Days to the following individuals. There is 2, 4, 6, 8, 9 people there. Is there a motion to approve? Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. Now we have operator's license, if I can find my agenda.
No. We did the operators.
Okay,
Owner's license.
right now we have application for William A. Lethert for amusement devices owner's license, DBA Mendota Valley Amusements, Inc., and permits for 27 machines.
So moved.
Is there a second? In discussion, Nancy has Nancy and the chief checked all this out. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Next, we have application from Scott J. Furlong for amusement owner's device license, DBA Leisure Entertainment, TW LLC, and permits for 5 vending machines, or 5 machines, excuse me. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Is there a second? Any discussion? These machines are at Pudge's. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Application of Faith Community Church for a special event permit for Sunday, June 24th in Lakefront Park. And I don't know, Lori, are you going to go through that, or Nancy, do you want to go through it? Did it come to Public Works? No, it was at,
There was a special event permit application for Faith Community Church. It has been distributed to the Public Safety, EMS, Plan Commission, Public Works Departments. The only information that I received back after the people in those departments signed off was that the portable restrooms and trash cans they need to talk to Tom Zulli about where to put the placement of those things. And then have an appointment set up to talk with Tom about doing that. And then the other consideration would be a reduction in the amount of the insurance coverage required. So I attached the certificate of insurance that they provided and recommend that we accept the coverage as presented.
This doesn't interfere with the booster setup, does it? No.
This isn't the same time period.
Okay.
Nancy, how many years have we done this? Is this the third, second?
This is actually the first application from this.
It's the first time they've gone over 1,000.
Right.
Right.
They had the event 2 years ago, I think.
Larry, was it 2 years ago or three?
The third consecutive, I think.
Yep, okay,
Larry Simon is here, he can.
yep, if anybody has any questions, so that was one of my questions, the third year. Again, the issue with the insurance, we've lowered it for other events. Thinking what kind of issues we may have, I don't think this has been a problem event for us. At least I don't believe it has been.
Move would recommend approval.
Is there a second? Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. Thanks, Larry. I'll start off with our next item is an update on the Hudson Area Joint Library Board, and then I'm going to turn it over to Neil. Neil's done a lot of work on this. One of the things that we're trying to sort through is whether or not we have a joint library board or we have a city library. That'll have to be determined probably within the next couple months. City taxpayers will be subject to both the city levy for the library services and county library levy unless some form of legislation action is taken. For 2013, the county library levy is projected to be approximately $256,500. Additional city funding for the library in 2013 will be needed to be exempt from the county library levy. The amount of additional city funding for library will vary based on whether the library remains a joint library and the percentage of cost of the library is reimbursed for circulation to residents on communities not participating in the library. These variables are shown on the Library Steering Committee recommendation that the joint library be disbanded and operated as a city library, and the county reimburse the library at 100% of costs, which exceeds the 70% state minimum. The attached provide projections of costs for each of the Hudson Area Joint Library members and the impact on library revenues under a series of options. The first sheet looks at each option, while the second sheet shows the impact of each option based on the community. The chart is based on the second sheet and provides graphic representation for each of the options, the city taxpayers. Note that none of the options presented are based on all members taking the same action. The results will be vary if they don't all act in the same way, correct? We've had two things that I just want to point out that we've been talking about. One of the things we talk about is if we disband our library and have a city library, the other three municipalities then would lose that funding mechanism. They would lose that levy limit. For example, if we go to the first page, or the second page there, let's use the town of Hudson. They're 183,000, in the first line, 183,864. They lose that out of their general operating budget, okay? Because if it's dissolved, they're not part of it anymore, right? It's just a city.
Correct.
So they lose $183,000. St. Joe, let's, again, assuming we dissolve it, 83,000, Village of North Hudson, 82,000. So that money flows out of the operating budgets of those particular ones. Our interpretation that we looked at is said it could flow into the city's availability on the levy limit if we decide we wanted to do that, we should be able to use that money. Again, based on whether you folks think it's, and our taxpayers would have to pay that amount, okay? Well, the Department of Revenue says you can't do it that way. So you still have to, even though that money is pulled out of the system, it can't be utilized by a single library at this point. That's been we have one more person to go to, correct? So we're waiting for one more person to get back. Lori, you look like you want to ask a question.
No. I want to ask a lot of questions, but I'm going to wait.
Okay. Then the other thing that we were looking at, again, depending on where we're going, and this can be whether it's a joint library or an individual library or a city-owned library only, is whether or not we would like to do a referendum and ask the voters whether or not they want to fund the library. Because if we have to follow our levy limits, I don't know where we'd get the money without shorting some of our other departments, whether it's, and I'm not going to say what department it may be, but that would be a real tough thing. And
If we're out of the,
either way,
but I guess I'm asking the total, let's say if we go on the county city library, city of Hudson non-exempt from the county levy. We've got to come up with additional 278.9.
No, we have to come up with 631,000.
I'm sorry to
Okay.
interrupt.
Yep,
Is Neil gonna do a?
yep,
Okay,
Yeah.
can we do that before we get into,
sure, we can do that, but I have one other thing that let me finish on the referendum. Neil pointed out, was it December 1st or November 1st, the law changed?
Correct.
And it used to be 41 days for a referendum to get on the ballot. It's now 72 or 70? 70 days.
Went from 6 weeks to 10 weeks, basically.
Right.
okay, from the date of the referendum?
Backwards to the date the
Backwards.
resolution is.
In other words, we'd have to have something ready to go in November if we wanted to, or November, in June, if we wanted to get it on the August.
Well,
Yeah,
and
if
we
we
pretty
wanted to
much,
get it on August, you would pretty much need to take action within the next week.
And it's not gonna
yeah,
happen.
and
It's
we
not
don't
gonna
have the
happen.
numbers really.
I don't know if we'll
it'd be
even
based
ever
on
have the numbers for
estimates.
that.
Well, we should have pretty good numbers, I think, by August.
That's, yeah,
I mean,
that is
not
correct,
good
because
numbers,
the
but-
information will be here in terms of equalized value.
Yeah,
And the
yeah.
county will have the information with regard to their levy by the middle of August. There's an August 15 release date.
Yep,
So we should know pretty much where we sit as of that date, and we should be able to calculate what our new levy limit
it's
will
gonna be real tight,
right around that date.
be real
But it is
tight.
going to be tight because we would have to have any resolution for a referendum would have to be filed with the clerk, who would then file it with the county clerk on, I think it's August 28th or 29th?
28.
28th,
28th, okay.
so that's really a tight timeframe
In
again.
order for it to be on the November ballot.
Correct.
Okay.
Puts us in a pretty awkward position whether it passes or doesn't pass if because we have to tell
Oh,
the
yeah.
company that we are gonna be in compliance or not in compliance. We have to sign off on it, and we don't know if we're gonna, so it has some challenges that we have to deal with. But at this point, unless you have any,
I do have one quick question
Yep.
before we hear this. What's the status of the joint library partners' interest in approaching the county?
That meeting is set up for June 17th.
Okay,
I believe it's the 17th. I keep getting the dates wrong. It's the 18th, I'm sorry, at 9 o'clock at the county center.
and I'm just referring to the notion that, we could ask the county to revert back to their previous funding mechanism, and this problem
It would help
would help.
from a funding.
So I wanted to make sure that that was at least still,
Yes. Neil is going to be the presenter there, I believe. Okay,
All right.
You're
yeah,
on, Neil.
And I think there's some lack of clarity with regard to the process with the county, and we're trying to get that clarified. They have changed with the new finance director, Patrick Thompson, the county administrator, has asked for a little bit more time so that she can better familiarize herself with the issue. And one of the things that is critical in this discussion is, in an earlier memo, their assistant legal counsel had laid out a timeline. One of the things in that timeline would require the city to take action to pass a resolution to the county stating whether we will fund the library at the exempt level. And the sample resolution said will fund, because obviously, you're looking for some kind of commitment, but obviously our budget's not going to be done until November. So in terms of the timeline and the process, one of the details we do need to nail down is that then I've asked them to clarify, is that if we do have a November referendum, how does that impact their timeline? And I think that is going to be one of the keys, and hopefully we can have that answer fairly soon.
And are we required to commit whether we're going to fund at the exempt level before the referendum?
why would you be so tough and ask that question?
Well, and I think that's one of the things that we need to clarify, because,
Right.
in a sense, it's almost an unrealistic timeline. And, so the question is, how are they going to administer that? Or if the referendum fails, could pass a resolution saying that we will, but if it fails, will they give us an opportunity to pull that back?
Because I wouldn't be in favor of voting for exemption if the referendum fails.
Okay,
We'll leave that up to Catherine to work the language into that resolution that has to go back to the county.
Yeah, but I don't even know on what basis she set up that timeline, because really what they need to tell us is when do you have to know whether to put that levy on the city taxpayers?
Right.
And that,
Seemed to me a
that's
November
the
date.
key date, and I don't know why it would be so early when they don't even have numbers even that early.
Right, and I think you would get that number when you're passing the county's budget.
Yeah.
Right, which is
November.
November.
Right.
Yeah.
But, you know, the big issue at hand is really, you know, and it's probably easier for people to look at the chart than the numbers, so your eyes don't glaze over too bad. The real issue is that whether, you know, some of the discussion with the county may be to go back at funding, at reimbursing libraries at 70% of the cost of circulation to non-residents of those communities. However, even in that scenario, the city is going to have to either locally fund the library at a higher rate, or be subject to the county library levy. And one of the things I tried to show as best I could in this chart, and it shows an interesting relationship between, number one, what the local levy is, and then you add the county onto that. And I think, you know, even though the numbers aren't here, the green diamonds are how much money our library receives. So if you follow through those, and we can follow across, the four columns on the left-hand side represent the county stays at 100% funding. The four at the right are the same scenarios at 70% funding. So if no action is taken, what you'll see is that the taxpayers of the city, and this only looks at what the levy impact on city taxpayers. So what you see is that the taxpayers of the city are going to be paying roughly the same amount to both the city to fund the library and to the county, and you're paying that money to the county to fund circulation outside of the community. So for people who live in towns without libraries, that's what you're paying for. As a matter of fact, if you carry that a little bit further, what you would find out if you play that scenario further and look at the county library levy, the four members of our joint library, if we were subject to the county levy, are going to pay over half the county library levy cost. So that,
Just the four municipalities.
yeah, the four municipalities will be paying for half the circulation in the county to people who don't have libraries. And, you know, that's really makes things difficult. One of the things, though, when you look at, you know, it's hard to talk about the benefits of somehow, you know, finding funding to raise our local contribution. But what you see happening in the two scenarios, if you go from the no action taken over to the joint library, everybody exempt, you know, what you see there, it's a minimal increase in total taxes paid by our residents. However, the funding to the library goes up dramatically. And you see that same relationship when you go to looking at what happens if it's a city library. If it's a city library, you again see that if we're not exempt, we're paying, you know, considerably more money into the county supporting circulation by people who don't have libraries, and our library is actually getting less money. However, if we can increase our local funding to the point of being exempt, number one, our library gets more money, and then number two, the total tax burden for library support paid by our taxpayers actually goes down. And I think that's probably the basis for the steering committee's recommendation.
But under that scenario, that money comes out of the city budget.
Correct. Somehow we would have to come up with that money. And I mean, if you look at the options there, you know, I think it was referenced before, you know, do you cut someplace? We do have the levy limit. We are working and still working, even though they've said no once, about transferring the levy capacity from the other communities to ours based upon the change from a joint library to a city library. And we're trying to see if there's any room in there so that that can be done, because there are some adjustments to the levy limit that you can make. And probably the third option, and it's one of the adjustments that you can make, are for a referendum by the citizens. And, I think when, again, when Al, introduced this, when you look at any of these charts, they are done based upon all in or all out. And when we talk about a referendum or funding, you may have, we've got 4 communities here, and each community would require separate action. So you're really looking in almost at 4 corners of the page, and unless they're all in lockstep, you're gonna be someplace in the middle. And quite frankly, there are too many permutations in there, and you don't wanna see that many.
It's like a
But at
bad
least it
story
gives you,
problem.
at least it gives you the framework. And if you just focus on the set of the 4 possibilities in one, at the 70% option, it's just the numbers are scaled down a bit.
So can we just go, I don't want to interrupt you. Can we just go to this page, the second page?
Sure.
Yep.
What we're basically doing is reprioritizing. If in fact you don't have a referendum that passes, we're reprioritizing city funds to the library opposed to some other department. Basically what's happening. If we don't have a referendum.
We're being told to
Right.
reprioritize.
Involuntary reprioritization
Right.
of city funds.
Right.
Correct. But if we go down to the bottom one on the left, which I think the steering committee had said, this is kind of what they like, on the left-hand side, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so roughly now we're paying $276,000 roughly.
Yes.
Again, we're gonna use these in general terms, so we don't get, right down to the, so roughly, we'd have to come up with $200,000 out of our budget. Let's just continue on. It's a city library. The taxpayers of the 4 municipalities, they're not part of our library, it's a Hudson library, would pay over $1 million in taxes for supporting the library, and our library would get $862,000.
They'd pay 547, wouldn't they?
I'm talking about everybody.
Including
Oh,
the city.
okay,
Yeah.
okay. sorry.
Everybody would pay over $1 million, correct? Isn't that the way?
Correct.
And our library is only gonna get 862. So the 4 municipalities are spending not quite $200,000 to help fund the other libraries. And if you go up to the very first one, we continue as a joint library with everybody trying to be the good person, right? And let's keep everybody together. We'd pay $1.2 million, almost $1.2 million, and our library only gets $700,000. $500,000 would be spent on other libraries to help fund them. Now, we talk about equity within our system. That seems to be fairly unequitable, in my opinion. Why should our taxpayers be funding the other folks? I'd like to see as much as we can get to our library. That was the point I wanted to make, and again, you go across to the other side, if you go to the bottom line, on the right side, and it's 70%, it's $330,000, or roughly about $50,000 we'd have to come up with.
And this whole right-hand side of the page,
Is that 70?
it's only if the county
Agreed.
changes.
Exactly, and there's no guarantee.
Funding mechanism,
In fact, I
okay.
think it's gonna be a tough sell. So, the issue is, under the 2 scenarios, one, we have to come up with $200,000 out of our budget or a referendum. The other one is about, what did I say, 50,000?
Correct.
And it is a yearly referendum to fund that, correct? Or is that changed?
You can make it on, you have to say in the question whether it's just for the next year or ongoing, and I would guess, well, it's up to you to decide whether you want it just for a year or do it every year. We
I
won't
think-
have exact
right.
numbers.
And I think that's one of the difficulties, because if you look at, and I think I have the number, if you look at what the county levy has been, now granted, a couple years ago, it was at 71%, then at 85, and then we've had 2 years at 100%, but it's grown from 941,000 to 1,015,000. So if you're going to do something on an ongoing basis, it has to have a dollar amount in it that can you levy, up to that dollar amount, because if you don't do that, you're gonna be there every single year, because I think one of the keys here is that the county the county library levy is exempt from any levy limits. So the county library, they can go to the ceiling with their levy on that,
And they did.
and they did.
Yeah.
So what you've seen is, as when they were back in, it would have been, 4 years ago. I mean, the past four, or, what will be the past four levies for the county library, 4 years ago it was 616,000. This year it was $1,015,000.
Yeah, so trying to predict that, and
Right.
it also affects whether it will be successful, because you probably need to
Yeah,
It's
put
not-
some cushion in there.
sure. But I think, the art is somewhat in the language, but I think the anomaly that Al pointed out was that if you look at the total taxes paid by our taxpayers, it's actually, it would go down by approving a increase, if it came to a referendum, the total taxes paid would decrease over the combined levy. However, our library would get more money.
Which scenario is that? Is that the,
That would be from going from number, on the left-hand side, from going the first one to the fourth one. So if you look at, cost to taxpayers, so if on the, I can call it the no action taken, do nothing scenario, projecting next year, the cost to City of Hudson taxpayers would be $535,000. If we raised our levy by the $190,000, go up to $471,000, the total cost to our taxpayers would go down from the $535,000 down to the $471,000.
And our library would get
And then
another
our library would pick up an extra
$150,000.
$150,000.
And that raising is only done by a referendum.
Well,
Or cutting.
Or by taking
Referendum
funds from
or,
other parts.
correct. Right.
can you talk about,
Go
go ahead.
Current funding under the joint library arrangement is about $762,000 a year, is that what it is?
629, no.
No, 7 something, isn't it?
Total, you
Roy?
mean, or just city?
11.
770, roughly.
770, right?
Yeah.
It's not a surprise that spending has gone up. When you reimburse 100% of anything, you've kind of removed any incentive for there to be restraint in spending. That's what's particularly aggravating about this. As a council that I think is pretty frugal with our budget, and we've asked departments to make significant cuts, all of a sudden the county decides to fund it 100%, spending goes through the roof, and they're telling us to deal with it. It's kind of hard to swallow. We'll do our best, but it's pretty frustrating.
Okay.
We
Comment?
have no other recourse or anything with that, besides trying to talk them down to 70, which I'm not putting any eggs in a basket for.
I don't believe so.
As it stands right now, as I think we mentioned before, there was that one, at least for taxes paid next year, any kind of legislative effort is, it would be impossible. If you recall, last March, there was a proposal that would have impacted the county library levy, that if we would have, maintained what was traditionally called maintenance of effort, we would have automatically been exempted from the county library levy. That was passed by the Assembly, was recommended by, it got out of committee in the Senate, but never got on the Senate floor that last week for a vote. If that had gotten through and had been signed by Governor Walker, we may not, the conversation would be much different.
Alan, did you sense there was interest from the joint partners to approach the county? I mean, is that?
Yes,
that's
very much so.
Okay.
And I can't predict, and again, they haven't been back to, this is the first time we've kind of come back to you folks. I don't think there's any way you can predict what any one of them is gonna do.
No, but it's just, it's hard to consider 8 different scenarios when really we may only be left with 4. I hate to see us spin our wheels until if we can get 4 of the options off the table, let's get them off the table. And
Okay. Well, I think we will probably have a pretty good indication, possibly after June 17th. 18th, excuse me.
If we could answer the question of the referendum, then the lower left-hand option certainly is the best option. If you had an answer to the referendum, if the referendum was going to be successful, that's your best option for everybody. The library benefits, the city stays at the 278, and the taxpayer pays the least amount of taxes.
No, the bottom one, Rich, we don't stay at 278, we go to
No.
We're at
471.
471.
We do, but that can be offset by a levy. That's what
Correct.
a referendum is.
Yeah, and the
Correct.
voters would
The
have
whole thing.
approved
The
it.
referendum would offset the increase, so
Correct.
that other departments in the city wouldn't be losing funds.
Correct.
Correct.
Right.
But the taxpayers would pay another 200,000 in taxes.
Which is lower than what they.
To us,
pay
but then-
on the
Yep.
other options, which is lower than any of the other options.
Correct.
So the taxpayer is better off, the city stays where it's at, we're not gaining or losing funds, and the library gains $150,000.
Correct.
So if the answer to the referendum can be given, to me, that's the option. But who knows the answer to the referendum? And if you don't have the
There will
answer
be
to the
one.
referendum,
Yep.
if you don't have the answer to the referendum and you adopt that policy, the city is in jeopardy for $200,000. In jeopardy, what I mean is we're reprioritizing $200,000 of funds if the referendum is not successful.
Well, if the referendum's not successful, you would have a choice of either number one, reprioritizing, or number two, the people would be, taxpayers would be subject to the county library levy.
Yeah.
That would be the choice.
Right,
And-
you'd fall back into what, number one?
Correct. And then we'd pay 535,000, our library would only get 700.
So if we have the option of taking the referendum, if it fails, we can go back to number one.
Correct.
And pay the same amount, but then the county's gonna levy our citizens the additional.
Right.
Well, it'll go back to number 3, right? Not exempt from the county taxes, if it's a city library.
If it's a city library,
City
correct.
library, go back to number 3, and they'd be charged 631,000, and our library would only get 670.
So if the referendum fails, we go back to option 3?
Yes,
It depends
If you
whether
had
it's a
made
city
that
library
decision.
or a joint library.
Otherwise, we go back to one if we stay.
Yeah.
If everybody
we stay as a
decides they
joint
wanna stay
library,
as a
we go
joint
back to
library.
one.
So what's your sense with that, Al?
Oh.
Obviously, I mean, those are some big numbers for those townships to swallow.
Without a doubt. Well, the question is, whether or not the referendum would pass, and I don't have a answer for that. Or,
Well, do they have to wait till after the referendum before they decide what they wanna do?
Well, they'd be in the same boat,
Yeah.
yeah.
same boat as us.
One could pass and three could fail, or, any combination thereof.
The issue is that if we decide that we're gonna, not be exempt from the county taxes, they're gonna tax us, or not us, our library, 631,000. We'll lose our $276,000 out of our budget, and the bill will get passed through on your county taxes. Okay? I believe that's correct.
Correct.
And our budget will go down by our operating budget will go down by $276,000, and taxes on your home will go up on the county level by a significant amount, or maybe not a significant amount. It's not a huge amount of money, but it will go up there, not on ours.
Well, it would go up 350, right, across the whole city?
Correct? Yep.
Yes. Yeah, if it was a city library and we were not exempt, it would go up to 350.
And our library would only get
1,000.
670,000 in operating, which is $100,000 less than they're getting now. Any other questions? Roy, do you have anything you'd like to add?
Maybe,
Or Barb?
something
What,
Well,
come up, if you would, Barb, come up and introduce yourself. Maybe not everybody knows Barb Peterson.
I'm Barb Peterson, and I am current president of the library board. First of all, I want to express on behalf of the board how much we understand the challenging situation that you are facing, as well as the leaders of our other municipalities. We understand how difficult this is. We understood also that if the transfer of that levy capability could happen, that obviously obviously was the best solution. We think that while readjusting spending is an option, we really think that the referendum, we would support that approach, and we would support it not passively, but actively. We would do all that we could to advance that option in whatever way. It would be a collaborative effort, but we would very much support that. Roy, do you have some more specifics that you would like to?
Excuse me, when you say collaborative effort, who are you referring to
Well,
collaborating?
Collaborating with you,
Okay.
because the referendum, it would not be our referendum, it's your referendum, but we would be advocates.
And I just want to make sure I'm clear, I'm speaking for myself only, I would not be advocating one position or another if the referendum goes to voters. You know, this body would vote for that referendum to go forward. I don't see this body as a campaigning body for
No,
or
and-
against.
okay.
Just wanted to make that clear. I'm speaking for myself, but.
Right. Well, as a library trustee, one of my primary responsibilities is to be an advocate for the library. And so it's very much within my job responsibility to support such a referendum.
Everybody, if you guys have been tossing and turning with these numbers, we've been swimming in them. And we're really all trying to come up with a solution, a compromise. Appreciate all the work that Neil's done on this. I think everybody in this room is banking on Neil to come up with some magic elixir. And he hasn't quite found it yet. But I wanted to comment on just a couple late-breaking things. First of all, with this levy transfer idea, I don't think that idea is dead yet. It has received an initial negative response from the Department of Revenue, saying that we could switch the levy savings from the other three over to ours. It certainly makes sense that we should be able to do that. And I know that we've asked some of our political leaders to intervene on our behalf, but that hasn't succeeded yet. And I talked with the mayor this morning, and there's other channels that we might be able to work through. And with his permission, I will pursue those. So there's some people such as John DeBotcher, who's the head of the Department of Public Instruction, that might give me a name or two at the Department of Revenue. And I might also just ask for a detailed response as to the reasoning as to why they're denying it, just to kind of flush that out and attack it like a lawyer would. So that's one thing, is that probably our best solution, the quickest way out of this water, is that levy transfer, and it's not dead yet. So I'm going to pick it up and really try to spend some energy in that regard. A second thing that just came through today, and I had advised John DeBotcher this morning that this Finance Committee meeting was happening, and there's too many variables, and we're trying to eliminate a number of variables or what-ifs. And Lori, this might be helpful to you, because you're trying to not assess 8 things, but maybe 4 things. And the opinion from the head of the Department of Public Instruction, delivered to me by an email today, was this: that even on July 18th, if the county votes to reduce the reimbursement level to the libraries next year down to 70%, it does not have an impact on what's required for our city residents to qualify for the exemption. We'll still have to pay based upon what was actually assessed in 2012. So there's pretty much a rigid formula that we're stuck with. And Neil, I think I passed a copy of that on to you. I don't know if you were able to study it.
I did. My interpretation of it would be different.
Okay.
Because if you look at that, you're right that the exemption calculation is the exemption calculation. However, if the county levied, and if they levied funds based upon that 70%, we would pay our proportionate share of that 70%. That's how I read John's response. So I think you separate saying that, the exemption is obviously based upon whether you met that 100% threshold, but all that we're ever gonna pay in taxes is our apportioned share of the county levy, whatever that would be. And if it's reduced to be 70%, that's what it would be.
So the amount that we would actually have to pay would be reduced, but the exemption amount is still high.
Correct.
Okay.
That's how I read it, at least. And, when you think of it, if, we're only gonna pay a percentage of their levy, and if they're levying less, we're going to pay less.
Okay. Thank you, and that's how difficult this whole thing is.
It is. One other thing for Barb and Roy and Linda and the library folks, congratulations on the great fundraising. It was $24,000, I don't know.
Almost
$25,000, way to go, good job, and we're glad to see that. Roy, you got some other?
That's the late breaking
Yep.
development, just a comment about, if you will, this is gonna be an argument that's made down the road with the county, and why 70% versus 100%. And we have all sorts of numbers to support the 100%, and whether you think libraries are free spending, or if you think of it this way, think of New Richmond Library. New Richmond Library right now, for people that live in the rural area of New Richmond, if they were to get a 30% discount whenever they check out a book, that's what was being fixed, is because New Richmond, for example, didn't think it was equitable for a person on one side of the street to be paying 70% of the actual cost versus a person that's in the city. So New Richmond made up the difference by saying, well, it should cost the same thing for both. If the county switched to the 70% for New Richmond, it would mean they would cut their budget by $90,000. And all of the other county libraries, they would lose about $300,000. And I don't see any libraries freely spending. I look at it this way. Let's say that you have a cabin up north with your brother, and you pay 1/2 of your real estate taxes, and your brother says, well, okay, I'll pay my 1/2 less 30%. Then you have to make up for the difference. Okay. And that's the point of view that I'd like to have you all think about. There's a number of ways of thinking about this, and it's a complicated formula.
And I would just counter that with saying the 4 municipalities are paying that $300,000, and is that fair for the taxpayers of our 4 municipalities to pay that $300,000? And I don't believe it is. I mean, again, it's a way how you look at it. Why should City of Hudson pay for New Richmond? I don't see why.
The nice thing about going to a city library is that whatever anybody in this city pays for library goes to our library. That's the nice thing. Right,
but if you follow this formula, we pay that $300,000 that the citizens of New Richmond, we're funding their library, and I think that's a bad way to run a railroad, in my opinion.
Well, there are separate libraries, that's true,
Yep.
but we're also funding everybody's use of the government center as well. So because we are taxed according to our property values, we end up paying more than the people in Baldwin, that's true.
And again,
thank you for listening.
You bet, and I appreciate that.
Good luck on finding a
Just
solution.
one final comment. Because if the library limits come to us, that we're able to utilize the other municipalities, doesn't mean we'll spend it. We still have to make that decision. We may have it available, but it doesn't mean we are gonna spend it. I just wanted that to be also, because we have it available, doesn't mean we have to spend it. Okay? Any other questions or comments? Thank you. Let's move on to our next item agenda. The St. Croix Valley Fire Service Agreement with St. Croix Falls. Chief Fry.
This item is something Eric had started before he left, and with the joint venture with Rescue, I thought I'd just pick it up. St. Croix Falls is our next closest rope team that has the equipment and has the personnel, and that's the basis for this mutual aid agreement, is mainly for the ropes, their high angle ropes team and equipment. This is the same agreement that all the other St. Croix County agencies are using for mutual aid agreement.
Have we ever had one with St. Croix Falls before?
Oh,
Okay.
Can you talk a little bit about the shift that's taken place in rescue between fire and EMS?
yeah, a few months ago, or maybe a year ago, we started a joint venture with St. Croix EMS and the fire department for personnel, to join personnel to train more of the firefighters in the rescue aspect of technical rescue. Last year we had probably 9 firefighters that did go through the ropes training, where in the past we had only a couple that were on both departments. Now, the way the agreement was written is that they're either firefighters or EMTs, EMS rescue people, unless there's an individual that takes call time on EMS and fire. So we just kind of merged the two agencies in the rescue aspect so that there was adequate staffing for the staffing was the big push for doing that, or merging those two agencies together.
Thanks.
That working good? Working well?
Well, it's working.
Yep. Okay.
We're still working the kinks out of it, but it's working.
Okay.
Why did you ask him to explain that? Are you doing something different where you're not sending out as much apparatus out, or you got cross
No, it
training
used to be that
going on?
EMS was
It
mainly
used-
responsible.
Yeah, it used to be EMS was sole responsibility of the vehicle extrication and the technical rescue stuff. And a few months ago, well, probably a year ago now, working with here in the police department, whereas we made a joint venture protocol or policy for doing this rescue. Like I said, staffing was a big issue, or ensuring there was adequate staffing there 24/7 was the big motivator for it.
So going forward, are you going to be the main contact on rescue or the
On-
EMS?
On the ropes actually is under the EMS umbrella,
Okay.
but the contracts came to my desk and I said, so I'll send them on.
Okay.
Okay. Any comments?
I would make a motion that we approve signing the mutual aid agreement, St.
Okay.
Croix Falls.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
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 Motion carries. Any other business that you'd like to add for
Well,
next agenda?
we should probably talk, and maybe it needs to go to public safety, about who the emergency management person is now.
That
Was
is
it-
part of the EMS director position. That
Is
is,
in the interim as well?
I believe so. I mean, that was part of that position, so yes.
We're in the process of hiring a new EMS director,
Okay.
Should be within,
hopefully.
okay.
Maybe by the first meeting in July, we'll have them.
Is there any other items that want to be added?
Information,
Okay,
our receptionist has resigned. She will be taking another position with Pierce County. We have a plan in place to get us through the end of the year with the leave and everything, but I will be bringing back information to you at the next couple meetings about that, so.
okay. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
We're adjourned. Thank you.